In this educational lesson brought to you by Organics, we're going to be discussing year-round pruning techniques to consider on your fruit trees within the home garden. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Charles Malki, biologist and plant expert with Organics, where we grow cool plants. And in this lesson, I'm going to discuss 5 helpful pruning tips that can be applied virtually year-round, in addition to 2 bonuses near the end. And just to quickly summarize, we're going to discuss how to use whitewashing products with Organic 3-in-1 plant guard products, how to use the fertilizer products, how to best care for you. I've got to my right here a plumeria plant, I got blueberries, I got tomatoes, I got an orange tree, we got citrus, and we're also going to discuss, I've got over here a fertilizing schedule for basically, when and how much to apply at different times of the year, and so much more. And we're going to do this 3 times faster because I've got 2 assistants. Over here to my right is Isabelle.
Hi.
And Victoria.
Hi.
And what we're going to start off with first is I'm going to have Isabelle give a tour. Just behind us is a sweet Meyer lemon tree, and we've got a total of 7 lemons of 3 different varieties in what I call our lemon square of the garden. And I just want Isabelle to start off with a tour that she did 4 years ago on what's called Isabelle Rose, the Little Red Gardener. That was originally published 4 years ago on February 27, 2016, and can now be found on, what's the name of your YouTube channel?
Isabelle's YouTube Adventure.
Be sure to check out Isabelle's YouTube adventure. You can subscribe and hit that push bell notification to stay connected to a lot of her adventures and some family trips that we take together. And before I get started, let's go and check out her tour that she did for us 4 years ago before she now gives us today's update. Check this out.
Hi, I'm Isabelle Rose, the Little Red Gardener. Let me show you my backyard. But first, I'm going to say what we're going to do today. So what we're going to do today is we're going to pot trees and I'm going to teach you about Organics. Welcome to my garden. Look at these beautiful lemons. That one, and that one are all the same. And my beautiful fountain here. And that one, and this one is all all the same. If you like this video, if you love this video, please subscribe down below and make sure to click on the thumbs up button. And my name is Isabelle Rose, the Little Red Gardener. I hope you love this video. Bye, guys!
So just a couple of months ago, we harvested 119 pounds of the Meyer lemons. This is a sweet variety. Some people say it's a cross. A lot of the research will say it's a cross between a mandarin orange and a lemon that was discovered in China and brought here to the United States by an individual. Last name is Meyer, hence the name Meyer lemon. And I'm going to have Isabelle give us a tour of what today's lemon trees look like. Check this out.
Here we have 3 Meyer lemon trees. Now, if you follow me over here, we also have 3 Eureka lemon trees. Now, over here we have 1 Lisbon lemon tree. Look how big they all got.
So a lot of you may be asking, how close are your trees? How can you possibly have 7 citrus trees in such a tiny, small area? And the concept, and we've discussed this over the last year with Tom Spellman of the Dave Wilson Nursery, as well as Cameron Akrami of The Busy Gardener, is a gardening concept known as the backyard orchard culture. And the goal with the backyard orchard culture is to pretty much plant your plants in a high density pattern as we've done here, but still not compromising too much on the overall yields capable off of each tree. And furthermore, we're keeping all the plants in check. If we allow them to grow their maximum heights, all of these trees would be about twice as tall. So through pruning And not just once a year, but throughout the year, we're able to control and keep the plants in check. And right now, I'm gonna discuss my top 5 favorite tips in regards to year-round pruning to keep your plants in check. Also, one quick general tip I want to share with you before we get started. We just pruned a lesson on December 29 of 2019 called When to Prune Your Trees. And just this general tip I want to share with you right now is the best time to prune your plants is after the chance of frost is past your area. You can enter your zip code, and I'll put a link down below to a website where you can put in your zip code to see when the last chance of frost is past your area. For my zip code here in Los Angeles, last chance of frost is the last week of January. So starting February and those first few weeks thereafter is when plants are going to really begin to push out the new growth and blooms. So if you can prune your plants in that window just before, if you're in my zip code here in Los Angeles, before that last week of January, that's a good 2 to 3 week window to prune your plants so that immediately after pruning they can begin to heal. If you prune your plants too early in winter, as a lot of people are usually racing in fall to start pruning their plants to collect those leaves so that they don't have to deal with the fall mess of leaf pickup and pruning at the same time. For those of you doing that, you're gonna end up with all these pruned wounds that are gonna remain exposed for an extended period of time. It's like going into surgery knowing that your wounds won't heal for 3 months, when if you just waited 3 more months and then went into surgery, healing can begin immediately. And that's the reason for waiting until the last chance of frost is past your area, in addition to the fact that you also don't want to deal with the frost damage to your plant because there's probably going to be more dead branches. So now you're going to end up having to prune your plants twice. So again, best chance of pruning, as discussed earlier, is after the chance of frost is passed. We also published about 4 years ago on December 12 of 2019, and I'm going to put all of these links down below in the comments, is harvest time is pruning time. And again, another great time to have had pruned the Meyer lemon tree behind me would have been after we harvested those lemons. So another great time for pruning your plants is right after the harvest. So once you harvest your plants and before the plant's resources go into new blooms and new growth, is to then prune it so that that energy is not wasted, as you're going to see here now behind me with all the new growth and blooms that are happening. But let's get started with now tip number 1. Follow me. So pruning tip number 1 is if there's any dead or broken branches within your tree structure, then that's the time to prune it, regardless of the season, regardless of the time of the year. So as you're going to see here, again, we harvested 119 pounds of lemons. You can see right here where I'm pointing is a broken branch, and you can see right at the break there's some new growth happening, but this is a branch that can be pruned. Either we're going to prune it at this point and allow this branch to continue growing, or we're going to prune it down to the nearest trunk. So that's a decision we're going to make, but I'm going to start right now just for the recording purposes, just to clean up all of the broken branches by just doing this right here. So year-round pruning tip number 2 is if you have any obstructing or blocking branches that are obstructing your pathways, then again, that's a branch you can prune. Year-round pruning tip number 3 is feel free to prune any branches that are up to a year and definitely not exceeding 2 years if you're going to be pruning during the spring, summer, and fall. For those branches that are over 2 years, the best time to wait is after the last chance of frost has passed, which we're talking about is typically late winter, and that would be the time to be pruning those branches that are over 2 years of age. Pruning tip number 4, take into consideration the plant's overall desired height. And how would you know what the plant's desired height is? One way to start is by reading the plant's label. For example, over here to my left is an orange tree. And if you take a look here, it says that the desired height over here is going to be about 15 to 20 feet. If we take a look here down at the label, we can see that it says citrus, abbreviated, and then standard, STD. And this is a Washington navel orange. So STD for standard, and it's saying that it's going to grow about 15 to 20 feet. If I try pruning this tree down to about 5 feet, then the plant is going to continuously want to keep itself in a vegetative state, meaning that it would continuously stay in a leafy green state and never go towards blooming and fruiting. However, if you keep the standard size tree, if again the goal, it's desired, the roots that it's been grafted on is a standard rootstock, it's going to want to grow about 15 to 20 feet before it really reaches its maximum bloom and fruiting capabilities. A standard tree could be pruned by as much as 50% and still kept in check. A lot of trees that would naturally grow, such as peaches, plums, apricots, figs, that would want to grow 15 to 30 feet tall can be kept in check at 8 to 10 feet. No problem. However, if you try to prune it again down to about 5 feet, then all you're going to get is a plant that's going to be continuously again in that vegetative state, and rarely, if never, into a flower and bloom and fruit state. However, if you're dealing with a plant such as this navel orange that's grafted on a dwarf rootstock where the maximum height is 5 feet, then again, you can now prune it again in half and keep a plant that's closer to 2 to 3 feet. A dwarf rootstock desired height being, if it's only 5 to 8 feet, can easily be pruned again to 50% to then create a much smaller, more compact plant. So if that's what you're choosing, make sure you start off with the right tree. And your choices typically when you go to a nursery or a big box store is going to be looking for, as in this example, STD for standard. Typically SD is for semi-dwarf. And then if it says DWF for dwarf, then you got a dwarf rootstock. So make sure you're getting your hands on the right rootstock so that it'll accomplish the desired height. And then keep in mind that with selective pruning, as we've done here in our citrus orchard, then you can keep your fruits to that desired height and still enjoy maximum fruit yields. My fifth year-round pruning tip is to discuss the structure of the tree, and specifically staking your tree to make sure that all the branches are in the desired growth pattern habit that you want to create for optimal exposure to light and ultimately fruit yields. This avocado that you can see here is growing away from the stake, and this here is the primary leader that we want to grow straight up in this direction, but for whatever reason, and maybe in handling, it's dipped over in this direction. And I know there's a lot of research out there that says take off the stake as soon as you can in that first year. Take it off. And I'm going to share with you a lot of trees here in the garden that have been staked at that very early age in that first year, in that second year, rarely into the third year. And that's the reason we left the citrus square, is because none of the citrus right now are staked. But for the younger trees, we're still shaping the direction of the branches. And specifically, let's talk about the primary leader. And then I'm going to share with you some examples on secondary branches and how those have also been controlled over the years. But with this primary leader, we simply added some twine to a stake, and we're going to send it in the direction that we want it to grow, which is going to be in the completely vertical position, like so. And let me give you a few more examples. Follow me. So this here is our 10-in-1 fig tree. We've now got a couple more grafts on there, so we're on our way to 12. And as you can see here with the branch structure, had it not been for staking and controlling the branches, a lot of these branches would be more in the vertical position, but we pulled them apart to capitalize on this vase-shaped structure, which will ultimately reap maximum light and ultimately fruit yields. Let me share another example. And here's my third and final example of controlling the shape and structure of your plants, is this 3-in-1 apple tree that we grafted with Granny Apple Smith, and this here is a family favorite, red green apple. And then over here to my right is the Gala apple. And you can see in front of me are a couple of sucker that came off of this apple rootstock, and you can see that they're growing straight up. Even though they're right next to each other, they're not growing in this vase shape that I've created through staking, and I've controlled it over a couple of years to make sure that they're in the open vase-shaped structure, again, to capitalize on light, and ultimately maximum fruit yields for each of these branches that are getting its respective amount of sunlight. So pruning and staking your trees is analogous to grooming and training your own pets. The trees that are behind me again, back here in the citrus square, are grown in soil that's only about 2 feet wide. And you'll also notice that the trees here are not grown in a bushy circular pattern, but instead as a very narrow. The soil is only about 2 feet wide, so I've grown them in what's called a free-standing espalier, being basically trained to be flat, but not completely flat as you'd find in the Espalier training method, which we're going to be discussing in the upcoming month or two, with a pomegranate tree that we're growing in the front and training that alongside of a fence. But what we're going to be doing here is basically growing it to grow more like a hedge, but we're not using hedgers. We're simply using pruners, and through selective pruning, creating, again, what's freestanding. It's free. It's not, pinned against a chain link fence or a wall as you would in an espalier, but it's a freestanding hedge. And that way we can optimize on our outdoor living space and still enjoy the beauty and the collection off of our citrus trees. Well, let me continue with the pruning before I get to my last two bonuses that I want to share with you. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring the tree back in check. This plant wants to grow naturally on its rootstock to about 10 to 15 feet, and I've successfully kept it under about 8 feet, which is my reach. The goal is now to bring it closer to about 5 or 6 feet, so we're going to bring a lot of the height down. Something I want to share with you is these two Meyer lemon trees that are in the front are significantly taller than the one that's back here. This is the third one. It's about 2 to 3 feet shorter than these other two. And the reason being, and I'm going to go into more detail with this in the bonus section, but the sun is angled in the sky, and it always is, regardless of where you live in the world. The sun is at an angle. Even at noon, it's not directly overhead unless you live on the equator. So the sun is always angled, and the plants that are capitalizing on more sun, which are these two, are gaining more height and more strength because they're getting their sugars and their energy from the sun, to the detriment of the one that's hidden behind it. And you can see the automatic difference and change. It's similar to these branches that are hidden underneath the canopy of the tree are naturally going to be weaker than the branches that are at the top capitalizing on sunlight. So we're going to help bring these plants in check so that this one behind us can get a chance at growing and also getting equal and fair access to sunlight, and ultimately to help support maximum fruit yields as well. So I'm bringing this height down by pruning this branch like so. Whenever you have crisscrossing branches, again, the goal is to create this vase-shaped structure where there is no conflict between the branches. So wherever there's crossing, I usually try to free up that crossing so there's no competition between the branches and the leaves, which are the engines, and the solar panels for the energy. So you can see that these branches are all in their own separate respective positions. So now the goal is to bring it in a little bit tighter, closer to the soil line, and so we're just going to bring it in like so. If you come a little closer, you can see that I'm basically bringing it back to like the next branch. So I'm bringing it in a couple of inches. I can cut, for example, here, like so, to the next joint, about 1/4 of an inch away from the next grow bud, or I can bring it in closer to this next grow zone, right here. Again, just 1/4 of an inch above the leaf node and this new branch, or we can bring it in even more so, right here. And you can see that we got new leaves, and eventually we got more flowers that'll ultimately support more fruit. Let's keep going. So check out the carnage. These are the branches we've taken off of these two Meyer lemons that are behind me. And now I'm down to the third one. You can see there's a lot more light now coming as it's not being obstructed by the other two trees. And what we're doing now on this one, and again, I want to share with you that the two that we just pruned behind me, we brought the height down, but the contrast with this one is we're going to want to drive the height up. So all of these lower branches that are here, I'm going to prune off. I'm going to leave some of these higher branches so it continues gaining height, and we're taking the resources and the energy from the side branches to encourage more vertical growth. So I'm taking some of these lateral branches off like so. And now by taking off these side branches, the plant can gain more resources going towards the vertical growth. And that will help to even out the height of these three Meyer lemons that we've got. The same concepts that we've applied to the Meyer lemon, simply going to bring the plant back in check, like so. So you can see this height. I'm now driving the resources and the energy towards this smaller, younger branches. This is going to be the new direction. We're going to send it. This branch here, we're driving the resources into this branch that's here in front. And we're going to continue. And you can see that it doesn't really look pruned. There's some more work I got to do. I got to get more into the tree. But it's making a big difference in regards to shaping and controlling the tree. By selectively pruning the branches, you're going to have a perfectly manicured plant that's going to fit within your home landscape. So we've just pruned a lot of the trees here in the garden, and the next step is now whitewashing. This is now bonus tip number 1. Remember, there's 2 bonus tips, and the first one is now whitewashing. And Ivory Organics has a variety of whitewashing products. The first one over here is the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard Protection Against Damaging Summer Sunburn, Insects, and Rodents, for use on roses, fruit, nut trees, ornamental trees, and shrubs. And it's for use in organic production, healthier than latex, paint, and tar-based products. You can see that it's now OMRI listed. And then there's the whitewash, or the blue label, which is also offering protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, and also for use on roses, fruit, nut trees, ornamental trees, and shrubs. But the difference between these 2 products is that the yellow label has the added repellent protection against insects and rodents because it has the added 6 oils, which include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. And I'm going to have the girls pick now between these products. Are all available in 3 colors, which include white and brown and green. And I'm going to have the girls pick what colors they want to paint with, so at least you as the viewers can see how these whitewashing products can offer protection to the plants, both from sunburn as well as in the winter sun scald, in addition to offering repellent protection against insects and rodents. While I get into more detail about the benefits of whitewashing, I'm going to have the girls pick their colors and begin mixing their cans. Victoria, what color would you like?
Green.
You want the green one? So I'm going to give her the green whitewash formula, which is right here. And she's going to begin mixing that for us. And Isabelle, which one do you want?
I want brown.
And you're going to do the brown. For you, I'm going to give you the brown 3-in-1. And I'm going to explain why to the viewer in just a second that I've given you the brown label. And I'm going to keep, as I like always using, is the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 color white. I have a lot of people that frequent the garden. They see the white painted trees, and I have an opportunity to teach them what whitewashing is all about, which is a hugely misunderstood concept in gardening. And as we heard from Tom Spellman, and as has been taught here on the Ivory Organics YouTube channel for many years, it's important to whitewash your tree the day that you plant your tree. And that's something we've been teaching for many years here on the Ivory Organics YouTube channel. And I'm going to, again, discuss more of that while I get these girls started on painting their trees. So let's get started with that. Ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's do it. So the first thing I want to share with you, when we open the product, that once you open the 3-in-1 plant guard, you're going to see your base powder as well as a bubble wrap oil vial. And we're now going to add these contents to the can with water, and then we can start mixing that. So now we're going to add the brown powder, since she selected color brown, to the package like so. I like to then add some water to it, like so. We can then add the oil. And we can start mixing. And once you fill up the can to the top, you'll have a can of brown paint, which I'm going to have Isabelle start stirring. Here you go. And now, Victoria, you picked the color green. Let's open yours. So as you can see, this product here, the whitewash formula, does not come with the oil. It's just a green organic base powder that'll be used for the paint. Now we'll add some water. And we can begin mixing. Here, Victoria, you can continue mixing over here. And while they mix their products, what I want to share with you is a couple articles about the importance of whitewashing your plants. And the goal is, again, once you plant your tree, you want to immediately whitewash the tree. And what I want to share with you here to the left is an orange tree. So here to my right is an orange tree that I picked up from the nursery. You can see that they already put a sleeve on it, and I'm pretty sure, I'd say with 99% certainty, the reason they put the sleeve on it is to protect that tree trunk from sunburn. Again, these trees, since they were created, have always been in close compact quarters with one another. They're created in bulk and in close proximity to one another, where each tree is shading the other. But once you take it home, that entire tree trunk is now exposed to complete sunlight. We're going to take off the sleeve here so you can see what I'm talking about. If you come in a little closer, you can see here that the standard size orange tree has been grafted onto, and what makes it standard is the standard size rootstock. And you can see here's the rootstock that they then pruned right at that point where my fingertip is. That is now exposed wood that we're going to be protecting with the Ivory Organics product. And then on it is the scion wood, which is healed over the rootstock to create. And again, the rootstock is controlling the size of the tree. Had it been on a dwarf rootstock, the maximum height would have been 5, 6, 7, 8 feet. But now because it's on a standard rootstock, it's going to be pushing 15 to 20 feet as this label indicates. And depending on the variety of rootstock. But as you can see with the standard shape tree, and especially at this young age, there's no canopy shading the underlying tree trunk. And all of this trunk is now exposed to, here we are now springtime going into 13 hours by summer, 14 hours of direct sunlight that can now burn the tree trunk, burn the underlying cambium tissues, and expose the underlying wood, and opening that up to insects to then penetrate. Beetles and termites that'll penetrate the underlying wood and begin hollowing out the tree and shortening the life of the plant. Let me share with you this quick example when we went to North Hollywood and they pruned a branch that was shading the underlying tree trunk in the spring, and by summer, check out what happened. Take a look underneath what happened here. And right here was the branch that was pruned, and you can see how large it was. It was at least 20, possibly 30 years old right here, and this went up and out in the direction of the swimming pool, and that was probably the reason it was pruned. And then take a look at what happened underneath. Look at the bark, how it's peeling. All of this is dead skin. If this was your body, this would be your skin coming on, and it goes all the way down, all the way down, all of that damage. Take a look at those cracks. These are 3rd-degree burns on a plant, and I don't know if anyone has ever described this as 3rd-degree burns, but this is a 3rd-degree plant burn. The epidermis, the dermis, and it's damaged all the way to where the wood is. So this is now a perfect entryway for termites and wood-boring beetles to get into the tree and start hollowing out the center of the plant. So Isabelle's now going to be brushing on the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard Color Brown onto this plumeria plant that belongs to Geraldine Thibodeau of POV Pool. And what I want to share with you, and something I saw as I was repotting this plant for her this week, is you can spot the sunburn damage that's happening here on this side of the tree trunk. And notice that it's always on one side of the plant, and that is going to be on the southwest side of the tree if you're in the northern hemisphere. It's just the opposite again if you're in the southern hemisphere. The reason we're using the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard, which has the oils instead of the blue label, is because of the burn damage and to prevent the infestation of beetles and termites and other disease into now this compromised tree trunk. So Isabelle, if you can actually begin brushing on, we'll do the Ivory Organics Color Brown, which is a very natural looking protection. A lot of people will ask, what color is best for my plants? The white, the brown, or the green? And the answer I generally give is it doesn't matter what color t-shirt you're wearing when you're at the beach. Doesn't matter if it's white or brown or green, you're going to be protecting the underlying skin. However, white naturally, as we all know, reflects the most amount of light. If you're looking for the coolest plant, and it's important to make sure that you're cooling off your plants as much as possible. For example, if you're in Las Vegas or you're in Phoenix, Arizona, it may be important to make sure that you have the coolest plant structure. I would then side with white. But if you're looking for a more natural look and a cooler plant is not as important, then brown and green are excellent alternatives, as we're going to see. This here is again color brown going on the plumeria, and Victoria is now going to be painting the green on our kumquat tree. So you ready to do that with us? Let's go. So here's our newly up potted kumquat tree. As you may have seen in some earlier footage with the fruit, we have since thinned the canopy, which is another important reason and time to also whitewash your plant. So I'm going to have Victoria now. We've whitewashed this in the past with Ivory Organics 3-in-1 color green. Today we're using the Ivory Organic whitewash. We're not using the 3-in-1, but just whitewash color green. And since we've done this about a year ago, you can see that the plant has grown a little bit more. There's more wood that's now since exposed. And so now we're just going to be adding another coat and going a little further up the trunk and protecting also some of those primary branches that are now exposed to excess light. So let's go. So Victoria, if you can step aside real quick, I want to share one more thing with the viewers, which is this Ivory Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard Ready to Use spray. This is protection against damaging sunburn, insects, and rodents. Both the whitewash formula as well as the 3-in-1 Plant Guard can make up to 5 gallons of this, and there's very specific instructions on the back where you can use about a half or a quarter of a teaspoon of the powder to make a spray bottle such as this. But you got to make sure you filter it before you actually add it to your spray bottle mechanism. But this is a way that I can now simply spray it onto the leaves. So we can simply spray it onto the leaves, get it into the stems, and give the plant some protection where it might be too hard to get your brush. And if you take a look at the leaves, you can see that there's a very light, almost milky white protection that's on the leaves, and that's also got on the stems, and that'll help further protect the plant from the effects of summer sunburn. Well, let's keep going with the brush. And Victoria, I want you to get the entire tree trunk as well as all of these upper branches as well, so that those branches will never burn. Okay? Here you go. So let me share with you a couple university studies that talk about the importance of whitewashing your trees and the timing for whitewashing your plants. Check this out. The first one here is from the University of California. The website is ipm.ucanr.edu, and it talks about the following. Sunburn. Sunburn is damage to bark, foliage, fruit, and other above-ground plant parts exposed by excessive exposure to solar radiation. Sunburn injury to bark increases tree susceptibility to wood-boring pests and contributes to tree decline and premature death. Sunburn is usually associated with warm weather and often with insufficient soil moisture availability. Sunburn is common in new plantings that lack a well-developed root system, restricted soil volumes, inappropriate soil moisture, or anything that makes roots unhealthy or prevents plants from absorbing adequate water may contribute to sunburn. Even in soil that is saturated with water, sunburn may occur. Sunburn often occurs on the stems or the trunks of young woody plants. Their bark is thin and they may not tolerate being exposed to direct sun in landscapes, especially if they were grown close together in nurseries, as we just mentioned, where their trunks were shaded. Older trees can also benefit from whitewashing. can be damaged when bark is newly exposed to the sun because of pruning or premature leaf drop. Removing structures or trees that provide shade or adding pavement or structures that reflect light or radiate heat around the established plants can also lead to sunburn. And so that leads to this point over here, where we've opened the canopy with all of that pruning we've done. As we've done with the kumquat tree in the front, we can also spray all of those little tiny thinner branches from also overexposure until that canopy better fills in with leaves that on average get replenished newly every year. So let's go and spray the entire canopy. Like so. If you come in close, you can see again the milky white protection on the leaves. That'll dry almost clear, but offer the plant some sunblock, sunscreen protection. So Isabelle just whitewashed this plumeria in the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 color brown. So the tree trunk is now protected. I'm hoping you can capture that. I'll move the product back like so you can see. So what I also want to show is you can also whitewash your plumerias as we've done with our citrus. We can also spray our basil, our blueberries, and our tomatoes. And it's a good time to spray them right after planting, even though they're not in the ground yet. I just want to demonstrate again what it looks like on these leaves, as you can see the protection that's offered. So I'm hoping you can capture here the protection that's on the basil, as well as the blueberries, as well as now the tomato. By spraying them, we've protected them, as you can see here, with the 3-in-1 protection against, again, it serves as a sunscreen, insect repellent, rodent repellent, summer sunburn, winter sun scald, premature blooms by helping keeping the plant cooler until the temperature is truly warm, pruned and grafted wounds, and then as an anti-transparent helps increase your cloning success. And what we're using it right now for is reducing transplant shock. When you go to plant these plants, they're going to also be a lot cooler. So what I want to share with you now is how sunburn affects plants and how in the northern hemisphere here in the United States, the plants are always affected on the south and the southwest side. I'm representing plants by this little duck figurine that if it were in the United States facing the equator and the sun is hovering over the equator, we can see that the shadow cast is basically on the back side of the plant. You can see there's a shadow behind the duck, which is the north end of the duck. The duck is facing south towards where the sun is in the sky, and that's why the south side of the duck is getting overexposed to light, and the burn will always be on the south and the southwest side of the plant, or in this example, the duck, if it's always facing south. If the duck continues south towards Australia, like so, and let's assume it's continuously facing south, now the sun is going to be behind it since it's hovering over the equator, and it's now going to be the north side of the tree that's going to be exposed to too much light. And that's the reason that burn will always be on one side of your plant. So when it comes to whitewashing your plants, I'm now facing the sun, I've got the light behind me, my backside, if I'm always permanently in this position like a plant is, if I'm permanently locked in this position, this side of me will be exposed to the light, my backside will always be in the shade unless I'm a tree living at the equator where the sun will make it directly overhead and give more uniform light distribution over the tree. But keep that in mind, depending on if you're in the northern or southern hemisphere, the amount of light exposure is different on your plant, and it's not uniform as one would think, that at noon the sun is directly in the sky. It's not. It's always at an angle, and that's the reason it's the southwest side of the plant that's getting the most sun intensity. And if you're only going to whitewash one side of your tree, consider, if you're in the northern hemisphere, whitewashing just the south side of your tree. And let's continue. The girls just whitewashed. Again, Isabelle did color brown. Victoria did color green on the kumquat. I'm now going to continue with the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 color white. So I'm now using the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 color white, and we're applying it now to the navel orange tree. And we're going to start at the base of the tree and work our way up. And what I want to share with you, if you take a look here at the grafting wound, this is an important area to protect with the 3-in-1 plant guard. The reason we're using the 3-in-1 plant guard, Isabelle used the brown on the plumeria because of the sunburn damage and to protect insects and beetles and termites from entering. Similarly, this is a grafting wound that we're going to want to protect from insects and disease from penetrating, and so we're going to protect this side as well with the product. And we're going to continue working our way up the tree trunk like so. We're going to continue working our way up until we get to the first of the lateral branches and protect some of those as well. The reason we're using the Ivory Organic 3-in-1 plant guard as well as the whitewash formula and making sure that we're using a product that's organic rather than using a latex paint or a tar-based product is because paint you put on your house, it's designed to be there forever. 100 years later, there's still going to be paint on your house. But as you can see with these trees that we're painting, within about a year or two, the product's coming off, regardless of what you use, because the tree's going to grow and it's going to contaminate your soil. So for the organic garden and for those organic orchards across the country, making sure that you're whitewashing in an organic way is very important. Also for the pruned branches within our Meyer lemon tree, we're also going to be protecting those as well. I'm going to go into the canopy here. You can see one of the branches that we just pruned right over here. And then we're going to continuously apply the product all the way down to the base. We're going to work our way up these other branches as well. And you can see there's another pruned branch near the top right here. And we're going to protect that as well. And then continuously protect the branches, especially the south exposure, to prevent any risk of sunburn damage. So the next thing I want to discuss as bonus number 2 is feeding your plants. We're now going into spring, and it's an important time of the year to feed your plants. And keep in mind, the amount you feed your plants in spring is different than summer, which is different than winter. And I've prepared this chart to summarize the feeding schedule. On this side over here is the quantity or the amount of fertilizer to be applying to your plants. And then this is the seasons across the bottom, being winter, spring, summer, fall, and then back to winter. And as you can see, I put the X's. I'm now going to draw the curve. When it's winter, you barely feed your plants. When it comes to citrus and other tropicals, it's a good idea to do some foliar feeding. But again, that's negligible. Just a small, it's just a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of fertilizer you're going to be adding in spring. And then from spring, as the plants are waking up, breaking dormancy, beginning to grow, beginning to bloom, the number of light hours are increasing. It's more important to continue making sure there's adequate fertilizer in the soil, continuously feeding your plants through summer. You may want to give another low dose percentage fertilizer going into fall. And then by winter, you're cutting back on your fertilizer as the rains return and pretty much wash your soil clean of all the feed you brought into your soil spring, summer, and fall. And the products we're going to be using right now are the 6 Macros Plus fertilizers, which give your plants all of the macronutrients that plants need. Specifically, starting here with the Super Blend, this is one of the highest NPKs, meaning percentages of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, you'll find of any organic fertilizer product on the market. But in addition to the NPK that the products focus on, this product gives your plants all of the macronutrients plants need, which is 6 macronutrients: magnesium, sulfur, and calcium, in addition to the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And so this here is the Super Blend, and then there's the Premium Blend fertilizers, which have a lower NPK, but also still offer your plants magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. And for those of you that have both products, something to consider to just follow this chart is offer your plants, maybe if you're gonna do the same volume of fertilizer on your plants, start off with the lower NPK in spring, or if you're going to use a Super Blend, just use less of it in spring so that you can follow this curve where you're offering the maximum amount of benefit during the summer when the light hours are peaking, when the soil is warmest, when the soil biology is most active, and that's when you're going to want to give the most feed to the plant to help support at that time of the year the fruit that are on your plants. And now let's get to feeding. When it comes to your container plants, I want to read these directions to you over here. The updated labels, and I've got this here in black and white, read that for your potted plants, it says apply 1 tablespoon of Ivory Organic 6 macros per gallon size container and up to 5 tablespoons every 30 days during the growing season. The growing season being spring, summer, and early fall. So what we're going to do now, being this is a 3-gallon container, is we can add up to 3 tablespoons. But being that it's spring, I can cut the dose, and again, we're using the higher super blend fertilizer. I can cut that down to 1 or 2, but keep in mind that by summer, I'm going to want to make sure that it's getting the full 3 tablespoons. And this here is the product that we're just adding here to the surface. And as soon as we go to water the plant, it's going to basically bring the nutrients down to the entire root ball. And the reason you're going to want to feed your potted plants every month is because every time you go to water, a lot of the nutrients are being leached out of the container compared to your in-ground plantings, which we're going to feed next. And so here we are now with the Meyer lemons that we've just pruned and whitewashed, and now we're going to simply go with the product. And we can add a few tablespoons around the root zone. And we're going to want to do this every 3 months. Then you're going to take your hand trowel and you're going to want to get the fertilizer in contact with the soil and past the mulch that we've got in the top inch or two. And the mulch layer is there to help the soil retain moisture, in addition to keeping weeds down, among several other benefits. And that's it. So if you've enjoyed this educational lesson brought to you by Ivory Organics, be sure to give us a thumbs up, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and hit that push bell notification to stay connected to all of our educational videos as soon as they become made available. As always, keep growing with Ivory Organics, and wishing you all
Happy gardening.
happy gardening.